Why is choosing the Defensive Player of the Year troubling? Is Zaza Pachulia a dirty player? Does James Harden need to be called for traveling more? The only question left is, say it with me, you win? Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown podcast / live Periscope. As always, I'm joined by Dave Dufour. Dave, I'm glad to have you here on a nice Monday morning. What's happening, my man?
Not much. Just hanging out. It's kind of cold. Is it cold in LA? It's cold in Arizona.
It's a little bit nippy. It's like, in the high 40s, early 50s in the early morning, and then it gets up to, upper 60s or so, 70 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's cold.
It's a little nipply.
We're 61 degrees right now, and I think I might have to turn the heat on. It's
And everyone out there is calling us the biggest bunch of a-holes of all time because they're probably freezing their butts off. I'm sorry, but hey, life in the fast lane over in LA and in I'm sorry, not Phoenix. Where are you again? Scottsdale?
I'm in Tucson.
Tucson. That's right. Forgive me. Okay, well let's start the show. Let's talk a little bit about some basketball. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't like to waste too much time on the banter, although the banter is never that bad. But I did want to say that I'm preparing a video on the Defensive Player of the Year. And I basically kind of discovered that there's a lot of sort of folly in this award to begin with. And my biggest problem I have is that, if I'm going to choose between like Embiid and Paul George, they don't play the same position. So their defense is radically different. And I don't understand exactly how we're supposed to compare those in some meaningful way.
Right. I mean, defensive assignments between positions are obviously much different. How much you actually are responsible for. For instance, Embiid, so much of his job is protecting the rim and cleaning up other people's mistakes. But then there's an argument to be made that the harder job is being Paul George and having to guard the best wing on the opposing team. Mm-hmm. And you and I talk a lot about how it's a wing league. So does that make wing defense more valuable? I don't know. And I think that the point that you're making on this is a good one and maybe something that they should consider as far as like the award goes. Maybe saying you had one Defensive Player of the Year is a little bit too, narrow-minded. Yeah.
I mean, and I know we're going into positionless basketball, but it doesn't sort of translate because we still have the interior and outside defenders. And so, for instance, when I watched Paul George against, Golden State, the game last week, not the one where the Golden State won handily. I mean, Paul George dismantled the offense practically by himself from the weak side and from even on ball. Now, in Embiid's defense, he is, covering a lot of mistakes made by the perimeter players who are getting beat, and he's able to block shots and to contest and then grab rebounds that are tough. So he does his own amount of work. There's definitely a lot less running involved with Embiid. I think that's safe to say, right?
Sure. Yeah. You're not having to work as hard in one sense, but there's a lot more awareness, I would argue, because when you're guarding on the basketball, that's all you have to worry about. Whereas, when you're the weak side helper, as he winds up being quite a bit, you've got to worry about not only covering the rim and coming over to help on the strong side, but you can't get burnt when you leave your man either, right? And you've also got a defensive rebound, which is, that's a big part of defense. And I know it's one that's overlooked quite a bit in favor of steals and blocks, but honestly, defensive rebounding is probably the more important of any of those skills because that ends the possession, and you're going to get a lot more possessions ended that way than with a steal.
True, and so there's no question that Embiid does suck up a lot more of those rebounds than Paul George, for instance. But again, Paul George is out there contesting the three to make them miss, right? And then we don't see Embiid do that as much. So it's a real tough thing for me. And we're talking about, Paul George leads the league in deflections. And I got to check. I haven't gotten to defensive win shares, but I know he's got to be up there at this point as well. So he is definitely doing his part for his role, I think, better than anybody else. And I think Embiid is doing his part and his role better than anybody else. And so it's like maybe they could have a co-defensive player of the year. I believe it's happened in the past. Do you have that memory?
No, I don't remember, but I'll pull it up.
Okay, I almost feel like we've seen that before. I mean, we've had co-rookie of the years, and maybe we've had a co-defensive player of the year. But either way, but here's a problem since we're talking a little bit about advanced stats. So, they have a new thing on stats.nba.com where they can go individually for each box score. You can see how a player did against a specific defender. So I was like, great, we're going to go through all the Paul George games where he had to guard really, KD and all the other really good small forwards and see how he did. Well, as I'm looking through this, I just said, you know what, let me look at the footage at least just to make sure that we're completely accurate here. And of course, it's not. They had KD going 4 for 6 against him when it turns out he only took 5 shots against Paul George. So I know it's a minimal, small amount of field goal attempt difference, but this is supposed to be automated. It's supposed to be tracking with like sophisticated computers and stuff. I went to the game before, and he supposedly defended Buddy Hield on 6 field goal attempts. He only defended him on 3. So that's way off. So I'm really concerned about this movement we're going toward tracking and all these different things, and it's supposed to influence the way we play when, in fact, a lot of these stats are just not accurate.
Yeah, I think that we're just in the infant stages of this automated tracking kind of age of NBA statistical analysis, if you will. And I think that they'll get better at it. You and I have lamented some of the stuff, even with Synergy and its tracking stats, and those are done by a human being. They're still not perfect. So I think that they'll get it sorted. But I mean, it's so tough, especially that shots defended statistic and knowing who's guarding who, and back to the positionless basketball point that you just made. There's so much switching happening. There's so much covering. The way defense is played, it's not an individual defense. So it's really hard to say one guy is responsible unless it's a guy who blew an assignment. Those really those are the ones that are glaring. This guy blew an assignment, and it could have happened early on in a defensive possession, and you can say, okay, well, it's that guy's fault that an open shot was taken. And I still, this doesn't account for like when Kyrie Irving does 25 dribble moves and hits a tough, contested fadeaway, and he makes it. Well, there was still good defense there. So it doesn't count for that stuff. And that's where, I don't think you will replace, like the scout's eye for that sort of thing, because a computer just will not be able to tell you all that. Not unless they're 3D modeling in real time. And, we're not there yet.
Right. They know that if the defender is close to the shooter, but they don't know if his hand was up, for instance,
right,
or if he was even in the air. Because remember, the way to contest a good shooter from the 3-point line is you got to be in the air now to contest the shot. And they don't know how to track that yet. There was a play that I showed on Twitter, before we started recording, where Paul George gets beat badly backdoor, but Steven Adams is right there to contest and force the miss. So all of a sudden, it appears to me that like Paul George is going to get credit for that defensive possession because he was on Buddy Hield, but he got beat, and then but then I also imagine that Steven Adams should get credit for the really good contest at the rim that forced the miss. And so now you kind of have redundant possessions here where they're both getting the same possession, and they won't going to add up to the total possessions you have in a game. So it's just really sort of confusing to me in that respect because, and by the way, if I were just charting by my eyes as an assistant coach for an NBA team, I got to figure out who I would give that possession to, right? Because certainly he doesn't get the layup unless Paul George gets beat, but certainly he doesn't miss unless Steven Adams is right there to contest. So I don't know.
It seems like you just answered the question, right? So it's a multi-part process,
right? And I would give the good marks for the defense because you know what? People do get beat, but it's the rotation and the help that you get afterwards, which is, really important. Right. And if you don't
when you get beat, what did you do to the offensive player to put your defense in position to succeed? Because, we talk about this a lot. Point guard defense is so hard to read because some schemes call for just you're funneling the driver out of the middle and into the help. Mm-hmm. And it may look like you're being beat, but really you're overloading, you're icing and pushing toward the help.
Right.
And so it can look like a guy is consistently being taken off the dribble where really he's doing his job, which is to funnel the ball into the help and either into a trap or whatever. And so I think that's where, again, this is where you're never going to replace the human being who knows the game and can, like the advanced scouts and guys like that, because they're the ones who actually can make those reads. I mean, I think you and I are pretty qualified to do that. Like when we're watching a game, we can say, okay, well, judging by the way that they're defending and how consistently they're doing this, I can assume that this is their scheme and this is what they want to accomplish. Are they accomplishing that goal? Not are they, is the opposite team, the opposing team shooting 0%, right, from the field. Not is the guy poking the ball away a lot and getting, 5 or 6 steals a game, but are they playing solid defense, not giving up open shots at the rim, not giving up open threes, and are they getting to spots and contesting shots? That's quality defense. Process over results,
right?
Because you may have a team get hot and hit 60% for a game, but
right, but are you
good defense?
Yeah, are you adhering to your principles, which in the long run will allow you? Because remember, like I said this before, defense is just offense without the ball. It really is, and so there is you have to run your offense a certain way so everyone knows where everyone else is moving and how you create a shot. It's the same way with defense, and even though the other team does score at times, you need to be able to stick to those principles. So a lot of those things, a lot of great points being made here, and also it's what's interesting, and you know this as well as I do on Twitter. Some of the more snarky and vociferous arguments I end up getting into are about defense, which is so weird to me only because when I watch it, and I've watched it for so long and know how to break it down, that's the thing that seems the most clear cut. Whose rotation it was, who didn't do which, and yet I'll get people out of the woodwork coming out of every different corner of the universe to try and really, and not even just say, hey, I don't think that's right, really snark, really sort of angry, really F you don't know what you're talking about kind of stuff, and it's really interesting. And I think, by the way, what that means is that a lot of people who probably played at some level of basketball throughout their lives probably just never really had a great defensive coach.
Right. Well, I mean, and most coaches at lower levels don't know what they're doing. That's why they play a lot of zone. You know, because while being really good at a zone requires being good at man-to-man, being a teacher of zone doesn't require you to understand defensive principles. And which is one of the reasons why I'm so against the zone. I just don't like it. A, it's boring to watch, but B, I just don't think that. I think it's kind of a cop-out for guys that don't want to coach proper defense, because it's just like, all right, well, here's your area, and you can play some Ole Matador defense, and it's okay because you've got these guys that are permanently positioned inside.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, that's sort of the Steph Curry thing that they argue with me. It's like, well, they're so good behind him, right? His defense is terrible, but because they're behind him, they make him look so much better. And I'm like, that's not really the case. It's kind of, it addresses what you're talking about. He's doing his job in his role and facilitating the proper way. It's not his fault that he's got conceivably the best defensive player in the world behind him in Draymond Green, even though I'm not even sure he's in the conversation this year for Defensive Player of the Year. Is he?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that their defense has fallen off so much this year. I mean, while we know that they've got that next level, that higher gear that they're not getting into right now. I mean, we saw it in the OKC game the other night, especially with Draymond. But it is a regular season award, and I'm sorry, you've got to perform, right? Like if LeBron James wanted to play all out 82 games and all that to be the MVP, then more power to him. But he is not doing it. No. And so team defense matters quite a bit for Defensive Player of the Year, not just individual performance, and their defense has really slipped. Well,
yeah, by the way, it's 9th in the league right now, and like you said against the OKC when they blew them out in the last game, that was probably some of the best defense I've seen by any team all year. It really was stifling what they did to them on numerous occasions or numerous possessions. So I think what they did was, it was a playoff-like atmosphere, and they wanted to remind us to some degree that, hey, we are still, the number one defensive team in the league or whatever we were the last several years. So so there's a good sign, I think, if you were a Warriors fan, whether that defense is going to come back, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're going to have any problem hitting that gear in the playoffs, but again, it's a regular season award, so you gotta perform. So I'm looking forward to seeing your video.
Oh, you're looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to actually getting it, starting to work on it. But what's actually talking about that kind of work, you're making me kind of hungry, Dave. And when I'm thinking about hunger, especially during the day, it's like the last thing you want to do is eat some really heavy food, because then you're falling asleep, and it really is terrible. So we got to tell everyone about these things called RX bars, because they really are fantastic ways of eating healthy and clean that will make you still feel good when you're finished and not hungry.
Yeah, and they're made from whole ingredients. This is not like protein powder. I mean, they use eggs, they use dates, they use real food to make these bars. Kind of an old school approach to a new world problem, so to speak.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they also use almonds and no BS, by the way. So it's in part of their ingredients is no BS with the eggs and the dates. And it turns out that real food ingredients actually taste really good. It really does. It's kind of scary because a lot of those other bars I've had in the past have been like paste, or like eating dust. And these things are really good. You can taste the real fruit, the spices. Like they have sea salt. Now here's the one thing that's interesting. They do the sea salt and the chocolate together, which I know a lot of people like. And certainly it gives you a mixture of things that are not always you would think that would work together. But they have 11 delicious flavor varieties, and they're gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free with no added sugar. So really just RX bars are the thing that you got to try out if you're looking for that kind of thing in a snack to keep you hungry. And if you're playing and you want to play better on the court.
Yeah, the chocolate and sea salt is my wife's favorite flavor. She keeps them in her desk at work, and that combination of sweet and savory is pretty delicious.
Yeah, it really is, absolutely. Anything chocolate I'm in for. It's breakfast on the go. It's a snack at the office. It's throw in your bag for the plane. By the way, if you have kids, please trust me, that's a lifesaver. And you know what? The other thing is great is that you can get 25% off your first order if you go to rxbar.com/Coach Nick, which is a great way of saving and being a part of the program here as a friend of the breakdown.
So speaking of the OKC Golden State game the other night,
let's do it.
Zaza Pachulia.
Zaza Pachulia.
He's a little problematic, I think.
I tweeted when he fell down against OKC a couple of games, or the last game before that, and it was like bowling balls, almost took out Paul George's knee. And that actually, by the way, was more serious looking to me potentially than what happened on Saturday. But it begs to be the question. And I posted on Twitter, and there's a huge response to it. If you didn't see it, it was sort of in the open court. Russ comes flying in like a crazy man. And knocks into Nick Young, and he falls down, and then in this sort of crumpled up mess of players, Zaza ends up falling across Russ's legs, basically. What was your immediate take upon seeing that?
It definitely looked like he kind of, could have controlled himself a little bit better. I mean, I don't know, man. I hate to try to place blame on someone when, especially for something physical, because I don't know. I mean, he may just be the biggest goof in the league and just a complete klutz, like KD said, but I don't know. I think that it's an issue. The league might, he might get a call from the league, and maybe the Warriors get a call from the league. I mean, you had the Paul George play that you talked about. You had this Russ play. We've all seen the Kawhi play from last year in the playoffs, which I even defended and said, hey, well, you know what? I mean, he was closing out and wasn't looking at the ball. Maybe he, again, just being goofy. There's a certain point, man, where you don't get that, you don't get to use that excuse repeatedly. He has got a history of playing dirty. At this point, you got to call a spade, and it just looks like he's being a dirty player.
Yeah,
and there's just no place for it in the league, man. And the league needs to do this from a league interest standpoint. They need to nip this in the bud. Draymond with the kicks to the groin, they came out really, really harshly against. Mm-hmm. And there's a better argument to be made that the Draymond kicks were not on purpose than what Zaza's been doing.
Right. I agree. Although it's interesting that, because the Draymond thing always kind of felt like, there was some sort of natural, as he's losing his balance, to balance again.
Now he exaggerated it.
And he hasn't really done it since. So for whatever reason, that got cleaned up. But here's the thing about what happened on Saturday was that, it was pointed out that at some point in that melee, someone's foot, I think it was Nick Young's foot, does kick the back of Zaza's left knee. But it does feel like there's a bit of a pause, perhaps, where it's like, oh, there is my cue to then I can go fall. You could argue that maybe that pause is like, okay, I got to make sure I don't want to fall all the way on top of Russ, so he falls to the left of him. But that means that he's going to fall completely across his knees. And the dude is what, 275 pounds probably, and he's certainly sweaty, which is another problem I would not want to deal with. But nonetheless. So that is the interesting thing. Now, he did give Russ a little pat after that, saying like, "Hey, I hope you're okay." I guess I don't know what he was saying with that, but we have some words from Russ that he actually weighed in as well. And we have technology here; we can actually bring that clip to you live. Are you ready, Dave?
I'm ready.
I hope everyone else out there is ready. We have Russ talking about the play with Zaza.
What you mean? What happened? What do you think? What happened?
I don't know. I couldn't see.
Don't lie. Don't lie. You couldn't see it. You saw the instant replay 4 times. What happened?
You fell on your leg.
Thank you. Don't ask me a dumb question you know the answer to.
You think it was intentional?
Did you see it? What it look like? What it look like? Did anybody touch him? Yes or no?
I didn't see the replay yet.
Oh, you didn't see it? But why you asking about something you didn't see?
I just saw
well,
the
then,
live.
well, then, if you didn't see it, don't ask me a question. Don't ask me dumb questions, man. Obviously, it was intentional. So don't ask me, was it intentional? Nobody touched me, fell over my leg, tried to hurt me, But hey, that's how I go.
Do you think that's something the NBA needs to look into?
Hey, man, they'll see it and look at it. You know what I'm saying? They'll see it.
Do you think you've had a couple run-ins with Zaza? Do you think he's a dirty player?
Yeah, for sure.
So there you have it, sports fans. We got the words right from Russ's mouth, and I don't know. I don't listen. I know that people who are Russ fans are already going to argue with me that I'm a hater and this and that, whatever. By the way, I'm not a hater if I show good stuff from him too. I don't think, but I got to tell you, the way he treats reporters like that, that's just not right. Just to throw it out there. But let's talk about what he said. So he is, convinced that it's dirty. And is that where we're at now? Are you and I, are Dave and Nick on the same page here that Zaza is dirty or not? What are we going to say definitively?
Yeah, no, it's a dirty play. It's a dirty play, plain and simple.
Yeah. Okay, I kind of go with that. I do think that there is enough knowledge of like, okay, this could happen, it could not happen, and where just because of that, it's dirty. It's not completely accidental.
Right.
So yeah. So he's looking to like flop. He's looking to create contact and try, and even if it's trying to get a foul, if that flop ends up hurting someone like his own teammate,
right, like he did last year with Kevin Durant.
Yeah,
he's a terrible flopper, and I just think this is one of the reasons why flopping needs to be cleaned up as well, because of the accidental injuries and stuff like that are going to happen, and. He's a dirty player, and it's time to do something about it. I think the league needs to step in.
Yeah. Well, here's a good question from Sham God or something like that. Who's dirtier, Zaza or Joakim Noah? I think that's a pretty easy answer, right?
I'd say Zaza.
I mean, I don't know if Noah is even dirty per se. He's just a real, energetic, and he gets after it. But I don't think
he's scrappy.
Yeah, I think there's a clear difference between that. Now, Zaza also could be sort of scrappy. I mean, listen, the dude plays like 12 minutes a game. It's not even like that they're playing him all these minutes where he's going to hurt people. And there is that sort of code, I guess, right? We heard this with Dellavedova when he hurt Kyle Korver in the playoffs a couple of years ago, where, and I bristled against that greatly because I feel like, okay, here's a guy who wants to play as hard as he possibly can. He needs to stay up with the guys in the NBA, and yet now they're saying, no, you got to chill it out, man, so you don't hurt anybody. And that's a really difficult line to walk across.
I think Dellavedova is also a little dirty. So,
okay,
yeah. I mean, none of them are as dirty as John Stockton, though. So,
right,
he's in the Hall of Fame. So
you're lucky you never played against me, because if this was the case, then I would have probably gotten thrown out of every game now if I played the way I used to, because, I was physical, whatever. It was physical, but
physical and dirty are different. Yeah. Physical and dirty are different. Physical is fine. Dirty will get you punched. Yeah, right? Like that's the thing. Like in a pickup game, if you're dirty or if someone feels like you're dirty, you will get punched. Physical is totally fine. Like most guys like a little bit of physicality, but dirty is different.
It is. And again, there are sort of variations of different things, and there's gray areas too. But I think you're right with the sheer number of Zaza incidents so far. Either that or he is just so clumsy that maybe he just shouldn't be playing in the league. Yeah. I think that's the thing. I mean, it's so frustrating to watch him anyway. He finishes so poorly on offense, and defensively, it's like they can't cover that with like JaVale. And by the way, is Jordan Bell coming back? I thought he was supposed to be back.
Yeah, he's cleared, I think, and they're gonna be ramping him up soon.
Okay, good. Well, we have an interesting question here. I'm kind of curious your take on this because it's a little different here. Is NH Yuki asks, any end to all the technical fouls being called? Suspensions are coming, and it's not even March. Well, besides Draymond, who got one a reputational foul, technical foul the other day for trying to incite the crowd to make some noise and got a tee. Are you aware who else has gotten a lot of tees?
LeBron got one yesterday.
Ooh,
complaining about not getting a call. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't think techs are even up. I think they're just more high profile, and we're talking about them more.
Are the referees more problematic this year than ever?
Probably not, but again, it's just the microscope, right? Like, I mean, with the replay, with the last 2-minute report, I honestly think if we got rid of replay and got rid of the last 2-minute report, we wouldn't complain about the bad refereeing nearly as much.
Interesting. So you want to get rid of the replay?
I'm not saying I want to. I'm just saying that the perception is now out there, right? Like when the league issues a thing saying, you know what, we missed 4 calls.
Right.
At the end of the game, it's not a good look.
Yeah. No, I hear you. The replay thing is interesting because we're going to see the replay anyway. Right, even if it doesn't, they don't replay. We're going to know that they completely screwed up that call. Probably makes it just as bad. Although I'm trying to think if we've seen one where it was They usually once the replay happens, they get it, they fix it. But I think if that ever were to happen, where they're like they get the replay call wrong, and I'm sure maybe it's even happened at this point. That's when things go crazy as well. It's a real problem, and I feel like. I think that the Draymond situation is probably the more concerning thing of anything for the Warriors because obviously the technical fouls start coming. And
he's close to suspension territory.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant. The suspensions are coming.
Yeah.
But the also thing is, luckily for him, it starts over in the playoffs. Luckily, because he's going to get close to those as well in those games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So speaking of the refereeing, let's just talk briefly about how James Harden. And his step back, it's not a travel. I think
sure
people
you want to
just
go there?
Well, yeah, just briefly. I mean, it's easy. I think the big misunderstanding is when the gather happens. So when the dribble is stopped, and a lot of people just assume because it's almost like they have to rewind in their brain. Okay, well, he stopped dribbling there, and I counted steps, and now it's a travel. Well, if that ball is still moving in his hand, it is the dribble is still alive. So anything he does while that ball, it's just like if you throw a pass down court, you can bobble the ball all the way down court without dribbling.
You
can,
sort
right?
of. Yes, I guess it's sort of. If you have control of it, obviously they're not, but you're bobbling it.
Right.
Well, I mean, but the more accurate way, or you could say, is you could kind of throw the dribble out in front of you and run after it.
Absolutely.
And you can take 100 steps in between dribbles there.
Right, because the dribble is still going. It's still alive.
And what the weirdest stuff is, so the weird stuff comes out of the woodwork now when people want to argue. They're saying, well, he took 4 steps after the ball bounced the last time. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything?
The dribble doesn't stop.
Yes.
It doesn't. The steps don't start on that bounce. The steps start when the dribble is discontinued, which isn't until he gets his hand underneath the ball or grabs it with the other hand.
Yes,
this is almost like
you must have talked about this before. It sounds like you have the correct information.
I have.
Now, here's the thing.
I teach that step back.
And are they not calling it at the high school level?
They want to. But they call Euro steps travels as well. So
we'll get into that later. But so here's what's going on because I don't think people want to understand that Harden practices this move.
Right.
He has got it down to a science. So this is not like some random thing where, he just got away with something. No, he is splitting his feet. He's doing a split, lifting both feet splitting, and he's planting the front foot as a jab.
Exactly.
And so he is now timed it perfectly where he does that front foot lands, and then he gathers the ball, and then he does 1-2. And you can do a 1-2 going to the basket for a layup. You can do a 1-2 going sideways toward the sideline. You can go back toward the half court. It doesn't matter where you do the 1-2. It just matters when you pick it up, and that's what he's done. And the referees, they've studied this, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah,
You know?
and that's the part, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I think that's the part that kills people. It's that if he was going forward, no one would ever think it was a travel. But it's because he steps in a way that most people are unfamiliar with, because the majority of people watching basketball, maybe they've played pickup basketball and scored a layup, right? Or taken 2 steps forward and maybe shot a floater, probably not. But most of them have never done a step back. They do not understand the footwork, and it's a weird thing to their brain to watch this guy take those steps back.
Oh, yeah. And also, it's a weird thing because it's a high-level skill to be able to spin that ball in your hand as you're going and not actually discontinue the dribble and not dribble it. And you're not carrying it. And that's a thing, like you watch LeBron, he can get down the court in, 3 dribbles? All the way.
3 dribbles.
Yeah.
Most NBA players can get down the court in 3 dribbles.
3, maybe 4. I showed Giannis doing it in 4, but he probably didn't need the 4th one.
Right. I feel like Giannis could do 2.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Right, and that's and by the way, part of it is because he's such long steps, and then his hand's so big that he can kind of control it and spin it and all that stuff. So so that's the key here. I remember I was working with a guy, a D3 player. He was a good player, wasn't like a great dribbler, but a good shooter, and a good he's a senior at D3, and he really couldn't do it. And part of the reason why he couldn't handle it was because he was trained, as we train almost everybody, to pound the ball and low by your knee, and you take way too many dribbles. And so we need to kind of reattack the way we teach dribbling. And I've got a whole lot of ideas. I'm going to start shooting some videos because I feel like we haven't taught it properly.
One of the things I focus on, pushing the ball out ahead, especially, off of a rebound transition.
Yeah.
Harden is fantastic at it. Steph Curry is really great at it. I actually posted a video on Twitter of Harden coming off a screen and exploiting a miscommunication between Taj Gibson and Jimmy Butler. And he wound up using Taj Gibson as a screener by pushing the ball way out ahead. And that kind of stuff, I mean, you're so in control when especially a guy like Harden. He's got so much body control and so much ball control. He's able to do that stuff in traffic. It's incredible.
Absolutely. So, so I think that's the thing. We're talking about running with the ball. It's a 45-degree angle out in front of you, really. And yet what we teach most of the time is, straight down and 90 degrees, right? And so all of a sudden when you're trying to move, which is when you're dribbling, excuse me, when you dribble, you're moving almost all the time. And so, although it's funny because what was I doing? I was talking to somebody about how, it's like you never see, sort of stagnant dribbles more than 1 or 2. And of course, whatever game I was watching had all these floppy sets. And so the point guards are sitting there for 6 dribbles on top, waiting and whatever. But most of the time for most players, it's not the case. And it's a real interesting skill you have to develop. And also the wrist thing. I'm an alligator armed. This is one of my big thing now, where they don't actually even straighten their arm on a dribble. They just flick it with their wrist.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what everyone does. And I don't think anyone ever really teaches it that much. And so I'm on a new quest to try and teach that and show the crossover with the alligator arms, only the wrist. Don't pound the ball. It's not like because if you were to throw the ball in front like that and it's pounded like as hard as you can, the ball's going to fly over your head.
Yeah, you lose it.
So,
one of my pet peeves is the transition hesitation, where guys hang the ball in their hip on every single dribble, and that it just slows you down so much. I mean, if you saw me coaching one of my players, you would hear me. I'm always yelling at him, "Quit playing with the ball! Quit playing with the ball!"
yes.
Like you were actually slowing yourself down by hanging the ball in your hip. And I mean, when I'm playing pickup with guys, if they're going to hang the ball in their hip, I'm going to poke it away from behind every time. So, when you watch guys do that, I mean, Paul George is fantastic at poking the ball away when a guy hangs it on his hip. And I think that, what we're seeing more and more of at the lower levels is it's a lot more of that and a lot less of guys getting the ball way out ahead, actually pushing the ball. I mean, I teach splitting the trap by pushing the ball way out.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
So. Yeah, you have to. Well, there's a great question here by Jay Varela, who, we're remiss if we didn't talk about Jimmy Butler and his injury. Big news over the weekend. He has a meniscus tear, and luckily they repaired it, did not remove it, which is sort of the new way to do this, and it will repair better, and he'll have a better career because of it. What does this mean for the Wolves?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the West and the playoff picture out there, because it is pretty incredible right now. As it stands today, as of this recording, the difference between the 3 seed and the 10 seed is 4.5 games. The Thunder, Nuggets, and Clippers are all tied in the loss column at 27. The Wolves, Blazers, and Pelicans all have 26 losses. The Timberwolves are at risk of missing the playoffs. That's what it, like, long story short, that's what it means. Jimmy Butler has by far been their best player. He's an MVP candidate. They have lived with him and died without him. And losing him is going to be tough, but I guess we'll see what they've got in Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns.
I agree. I mean, he has been that heart and soul of that team, and I feel like, and he's bailed them out a lot on offense. So the question now is, see, Karl Anthony Towns is an interesting guy because his footwork is so bad. And when I say footwork, I'm not even talking about pivots and turns. It's like just his whole lower body needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. His knees don't sort of strike properly, and they're usually out of alignment. His balance is off, so he misses shots. And yet he's still, despite that, he's still like a really great player that can really contribute a lot of to the box score. So it's frustrating when I watch him, though, because of that kind of stuff. And so, and Wiggins is Wiggins. He really is the guy who we kind of all thought he was going to be, right? He's sort of, the ceiling is never going to get, he's never going to get to his ceiling, right? He's sort of always going to be the guy we're waiting for, whatever, right? You don't ever see him like having another gear and another part of his career at this point, do you?
I mean, I don't know. It's early.
Is it?
It's pretty early. I mean, this is year 4.
It's
year 5.
This is year 1, 2, 3. Year 4.
Okay.
And all right, he's only 22.
Yeah.
I thought he was like 23, 24.
No,
but
he's still got some growth, I think. But what we're seeing this year is not amazing. Right. And then that big extension kicks in this summer. So I don't know, man. It's tricky. You and I talked quite a bit about Tibbs' over reliance on Jimmy Butler in general. Mm-hmm. And in particular on his starting lineup, and this is where it's, this is where we see how big of a mistake it was. Is the next man up ready to step up? Yeah,
I mean, okay, then you can argue, well, we don't know if it's really that or not. Well, maybe we'll never know, but I agree with you. There's at some point you've got to look at this and say they're all playing 37, 38 minutes a game, which is by probably 2 or 3 minutes more than your typical starting lineup. I'm going to call up the 5-man lineups right now because we do this every podcast, right, where we compare. Yeah. And it's not a great comparison either because other teams probably have injuries to their starters. But if you look at overall minutes here, actually, wait a minute. It's interesting.
I'm not even saying that the minutes caused the injury or anything to that effect. I'm just saying that you're overly reliant on your starters. And so losing Jimmy Butler, who is by far your most important player, well, now you got to figure out something else. You're going to have to throw someone else in the mix. And chemistry is an issue. It's essentially down the stretch when you're trying to clinch this playoff position, which you don't have clinched yet. You got to throw a new guy into the mix and hope it works out. And then Jimmy, if they make the playoffs, he's back roughly in time to play like maybe a week or two, just to get ready for the playoffs. So I don't know, man. If you put a gun to my head and force me to make a pick, I would say they wind up missing the playoffs.
Okay, well if they miss the playoffs, who moves up between the Clippers and the Jazz?
Well, I think the Jazz. The Jazz do for sure. Although the Clippers have been playing well. I think this is Doc Rivers' best coaching job.
Yeah, I'll have to kind of dive into the footage to find out exactly why that is, right, or what's different per se. I don't know. Do you have any feelings to that?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. I mean, he's holding it together with duct tape and zip ties. It's impressive.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Ty Wallace, a friend of the Breakdown, is one of only 5 rookies to average 9 points and whatever it was, a whole long list of things. And he was among the leaders with Ben Simmons and all the other Donovan Mitchell. So
they've got a decision to make on him.
Yes, it's time that they need to sign him with a regular contract.
His 2-way deal expires in a couple days. So
yeah, so I think that's probably why that came out. So at any rate, well, let's see. Can we turn to a couple questions real quick as we wrap up here?
Let's do it.
Anything
Rapid
in the
fire.
Periscope? Yeah, let's do it. What do you think about the Wizards being better without John Wall? Great question. I watched them the other day. I've been saying this, right? They should break it up, and I think they should trade John Wall and get whatever they can for him now while he's at probably the most he's going to be worth.
The most impressive part of this to me is not just Bradley Beal being really, really good. It's Thomas Satoransky looking like a real starter in the NBA. I mean, he's been fantastic, and he's got elite size, and he's a really good athlete. He needs to be less afraid to shoot, and I think that will come as he gets more comfortable. But it's something. That's a thing.
Yeah, Satoransky, you can see like minute by minute, though. It's like, he's getting more and more comfortable. So that's what's exciting about that, for sure. I'm just kind of curious looking here. When you have, so the starting lineup now with Beal, Gortat, Markieff Morris, Otto Porter, and Satoransky, 19 games, 225 minutes. It's the second most played lineup all year long after the Wall starting lineup. They're plus 15.2. That's really impressive.
That's fantastic.
And so that just changes the dynamic of, without Wall, things change. You know what? How about that for a video? Maybe like the difference between with Wall and without Wall, and why it's better.
I think that would probably be a good one.
All right, I'll have to share that with Eric and put that on the list. Let's see here. What do you think about the Sixers acquiring LeBron? Zach Sertan.
I don't think that they should.
Yeah, that would be a bummer for Simmons, right?
Right. You can't play them together, I don't think. Yeah. I mean, you can because it's it's LeBron and he'll figure it out, but it totally minimizes Simmons.
It's also because you see how long. I mean, Simmons, the other Simmons, Bill was talking about how long LeBron intends to keep playing for. And I understand he'd want to find a situation where he's not like the man, but if he's going to play to, let's say, I mean, he said 40. Let's just say he plays to like 37. That's 4 more years of like not getting Ben Simmons completely, doing Ben Simmons things. That would be a bummer for me.
Yeah, I want to see Simmons continue to do what he's doing.
Yeah. Now, John Adelon asks, John A., whatever your name is, Adelion asks, was Coach Pop trying to recruit LeBron with his positive thoughts on him as a player person? That's a fascinating question because we saw that, Pop was really effusive in his praise for LeBron speaking out about the political stuff and things, which is really great. And by the way, whatever I think about LeBron as a player, and I might point out things that people don't like about that they don't like about me saying it, there's no question that his advocacy and his willingness to speak out on issues in society are really commendable. But is Pop recruiting?
No, I mean he's the coach of USA Basketball. I think he's doing his recruiting, over wine at dinner.
Right. Fair enough. All right, Good idea. Do you think Paul George is a top 5 player? Asks Emmanuel Love. Team.
No. Top 5 player in the
What's
league.
The list?
Paul George? No. It's
KD, LeBron.
It's KD, LeBron, Steph,
Harden?
Anthony Davis, Harden, or Giannis. I mean,
Yeah, right. Okay. So he's not top 5.
No.
Although, you want to do this two-way player nonsense? No.
No.
All right.
No.
Zach Sertan asks, do you like the newly proposed play-in tournament for playoffs?
No. I think it's a terrible idea.
I missed that. What is that proposed idea?
Where basically they would take the 7 through 10 seed or whatever and have them play for the last 2 playoffs. No.
I'd rather just see 1 through 16.
Yep.
All right, and then Bo Baggins, very clever way of writing that out, says, if you are the Mavs and you have the number 1 pick, who do you take? Now, here's a problem, because you'd say Doncic, but they already have Dennis Smith Jr.
I don't know. They can play together.
Yeah. Dennis Smith Jr., is he going to get in trouble with all this FBI stuff?
No. The player, listen, man, let's talk about that just briefly. Tax concerns aside, okay? Whether they had to report that to the IRS as some kind of income or whatever, which it's such small potatoes and these guys are making millions. They'll be fine. Okay. The players did nothing wrong. I do not fault a single player for getting paid for their skill. Not one. The coaches, I don't think that there's anything morally wrong aside from the fact that they said that they would abide by the NCAA rules. So if you want to say that they're dirty because they said that they would do something, and they broke the rules, then that's fine. Now, there's a lot of stuff that is also like, there's a little bit of stuff that from a legal purview is pretty dirty, influencing players to go to certain management agencies and blah, 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 blah. This all started because of wire fraud. Right.
Okay. Right.
So if you're tied up in the wire fraud aspect of this, okay, well then you've got some issues. But the players taking money, they're not a part of that.
Okay, I don't mind that issue. I don't mind that argument either. I mean, I written a screenplay about the CCNY basketball team in 1949-50 and how they were point shaving, and I portrayed them in a very sympathetic light because these were poor kids that had no money. B, when they got there, it was so rife with this stuff anyway. It was the culture. It was like what you did. It wasn't You talked about it before you even went there. I was like, oh, the CCNY will do this and then they'll do this, and that's why you decided where to go. I have no doubt that there's probably some similarities here. That's why Sean Miller was probably so brazen talking about money on the phone. Allegedly. And by the way, don't we all know you're supposed to use the word, baked ziti instead of money when you're talking about that stuff on the phone? I don't know.
Funny. I actually talked about this the other day. I was like, that this guy didn't grow up in the world that I grew up in because he was talking directly on the telephone about the things that he was doing. Just watch The Wire once, man. Come on.
Yeah. By the way, I still can't get through the freaking Wire. It's like I'm on episode 2. I just cannot get through it, and it's driving me crazy. I'll try. I'm going to try and get through to episode 4, right? That's what gets you hooked, right?
I don't know, man. I liked episode 1. But then again, I'm from Richmond, so I'm like from right down the road. I can relate pretty well to what was happening. I was never like a cop or a drug dealer, but I knew.
Right. So, yeah, that's kind of like saying I can relate to The Chi because I grew up in Chicago. And I'm telling you, I watched half of an episode and I was like, I don't know what the hell this is. But it wasn't.
I grew up in neighborhoods that were similar.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, fair enough. So, listen, it's time to wrap this up and congratulate you for another great podcast.
Yeah. Congratulations to you as well. This is good.
Thank you.
The Wirecast Rendezvous people, if you're listening, wow, what an improvement.
Yes, absolutely. Dave, you can now move, and it's clean, and it's smooth and everything. So really happy with all the tech now. We're not battling demons as much as we used to. And really great stuff. Great questions for everyone in the Periscope. And don't forget to give us a little like and review on iTunes. Oh, I promise I'll remember next time to read some of those good reviews that we got on iTunes next time. We'll shout some people out. So get on there and do it, and I'll get you out there the next time we do a podcast.
Yeah. And I've got a friend of ours, Larry Kuhn, on my podcast tonight, so that'll go live later. Yeah, we're going to talk some CBA, and we're going to talk about the sports business classroom.
It's already time to start about that again?
Absolutely, man. It's now a summer league tradition, so we'll be doing that on my podcast that'll go live later on tonight.
All right, well, maybe this year he'll let me come in and watch for a few minutes this year. All right, so anyhow, awesome stuff. Thank you guys for joining us on Periscope. Can't wait to see you guys over the podcast. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Dave?
Yes, I am.